Courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode number 465. I am Andrew in our forum, and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. Joining me, as always, my co-host Derek, DP3 in our forum, and also on Twitter at DP3G and DP384. Derek, this week we're going to be talking about some of the most annoying mechanics in basketball video games, something the community has a lot of great thoughts on. But before we tip that discussion off, what's on your mind?
NBA All-Star Weekend.
Of course.
Andrew.
Of course.
I haven't been able to get into this for roughly a decade.
Same.
I think you're basically on the same page with that. And I posted on my main Twitter handle at D4384 defensive highlights from the 1993 NBA All-Star game, which was in Salt Lake City. And there's so many legends in this game, many dream teamers. It's, there's David Robinson and Charles Barkley and Karl Malone and Patrick Ewing and obviously Michael Jordan, Clyde Drexler. The game is just absolutely loaded with legends. But the highlights that I posted were like strips at the rim, blocks at the rim, poke steals, hard contests. These guys were playing to win. They were competing. They were playing with pride. And I haven't seen that in an NBA All-Star Weekend in years. And it's just disappointing because when we were growing up, we would really look forward to NBA All-Star Weekend. It was a big thing, and for me, it was a big thing probably up until the late 2000s. But I wanted to get your thoughts on, what's happened, to NBA All-Star Weekend and, why the players aren't as competitive as they used to, why the games aren't as competitive as they used to be. I just think it's really hurt the experience as fans.
Oh, it definitely has. There are times that I lament the fact that we don't have a standalone All-Star Weekend mode in NBA 2K or more recent NBA Live games when Live was still coming out, of course. And it occurred to me that I don't think the special nature of the All-Star Weekend hasn't been there for years. That same celebration of basketball from a competitive standpoint and just having the game mean something has gone through so many changes to the format and so forth that it really has lost that luster over the years. I love that compilation you posted. Obviously, we think of All-Star highlights. I think of Isaiah Thomas, though he's not one of my favorite players, throwing off the board to MJ in the 1989 game. I think of the 96 game with MJ's first appearance after coming back from his baseball sabbatical. I think of those great highlights, of course, but I also think of how competitive it was. All the defense that was played from the opening tip, basically. Yes, it is. There's a lot of showmanship in that game. There is a little bit of messing around. And there was that back in the day, too, that they were trying to make fancy passes and go for highlights, obviously, and show their stuff. But there was also that competitive nature. There was still defense. There was still kind of a playoff atmosphere to the All-Star game. It really was the ultimate pickup game. And people say, oh, well, it's just the ultimate pickup game where players are making highlights. But no, the ultimate pickup game where the best in the world were going at each other to try and win. Yes, they were trying to put on a show at the same time, but it's less of a show, and we've discussed this before, and we were talking about it before we started recording. It's less of a show and less impressive when those highlights are coming with absolutely no D.
Yeah, I have a few things to say about this. So we talked about this before we started recording, and I said to you, every highlight looks better when there's defense. Every highlight looks better when there's effort. Every highlight looks better when there's, maybe a player is facing adversity, right? And that's gone.
It means something with D, yeah.
It absolutely means something because a wide open dunk is never going to look as good as a contested dunk. You're not going to get those big blocks at the rim. You're not going to get those amazing steals. You're not going to hit a heavily contested three in, throughout the game, but also in like key moments if there isn't effort, if there isn't defense and everything. So that's why it's so boring to me. They're already shooting roughly 60 to 70 threes a game in the NBA today. That's like every single night, every single game, sometimes more threes. I've seen 80 to 90 go up. In fact, the Celtics, one of their recent wins, they took 51. So I see that in the regular NBA, and that's troublesome enough. But in the All-Star game, there's even less defense, and it's just basically just the same type of thing. It's just a bunch of threes, a bunch of wide open threes, a bunch of 30, 40 footers and whatnot. That's not impressive to me. Like I can go to the gym right now, and I've shown videos of me shooting. I can go to the gym right now and shoot a bunch of open threes from deep and knock them down over and over again. It's not impressive when there's no defense. If defenders are just moving out of the way and somebody goes in and does a 360 dunk, that's not there's no adversity there. There's nobody pressuring you. There's no defense. So it's not that impressive. I went and played at York Beach years back, so in Maine. And there was a guy there in his 30s who did a 360 dunk in traffic and threw it down. That moment in real life, and him doing that in traffic, was 10 times more exciting and more impressive than watching, I don't know, I'll just throw Paul George throw down like a wide open 360 dunk. Do you know what I mean? So the defense makes things so much more exciting and variety in the game. I think the players also owe it to the fans. Without the fans, there's no NBA. You know that. I know that. They're the ones buying the tickets. They're ones paying for, League Pass, NBA TV, etc. They're the ones buying the merchandise, the players' jerseys, all of that stuff. Without the fans, without that money from the basketball fan base, there is no league. So I feel like the fans deserve the players, to put on a show, and a show that's super interesting. And in my opinion, if you love sport, and I said this in my tweet, if you love sports and you grew up playing sports or you still play sports, etc., you want to see real competition. That's exciting, right? You want to see the defense. You want to see the hustle. You want to see players make great plays. You want to see players doing things that you in your wildest dreams couldn't do. Right. And I just feel like we don't really see that anymore on NBA All-Star Weekend. And unfortunately, it's that mindset, that non-competitive kind of just going through the motions mindset, and that play style has also kind of trickled down into like the regular NBA games. And that's unfortunate.
No, I agree 100%. And I think that mindset goes back to the whole focus on stats and eye-popping numbers because, oh, look, they scored 180 points. The final score is 180 to 185 or whatever. But if there was no defense, then it's really just a shooting exhibition, and that's what the three-point shootout is for.
Stats without substance.
Absolutely,
exactly.
And without context and substance. So it's really... The fact they've had to bring in the ELAM concept, which I just don't like. I see why people like it because, it brings the game to an end quicker and everything, and they feel it's more exciting because it's racing towards that target score. I see why people like it. I just think it's messing around with the format of basketball too much. I think that you just have to leave that tradition in place. I know that keeping things just out of tradition as a blanket statement is not necessarily a positive approach, but this is a situation where you're messing with a formula that doesn't need to be changed, but it's something they have to do because people's lost interest in that traditional competition and sport. And it's a real shame that it's gone that way. And I also agree that about the time frame that you mentioned, that late 2000s was the last time I was really invested in the All-Star Weekend, or maybe the early 2010s, a couple of years into that. And people might say, oh, well, you're getting older, you're just losing interest. But no, it was definitely around that time where there was that shift in mindset. We were starting to see it by the early 2010s, and by the mid-2010s, it had just turned into an impromptu three-point shootout. And yeah, it just hasn't been exciting. And it's a damn shame because I love the All-Star Weekend growing up, watching basketball, getting the old dazzling dunks and basketball bloopers tape and seeing the recaps of those All-Star Weekends and the dunk contests, what really made me a fan as I was really getting into basketball and learning about its history and learning about the history of the All-Star game and the dunk contest and three-point shootout. So, yeah, it's a shame. And look, I hate to complain about it because it makes you sound like a grumpy old head, but no, you look back at those events and they were genuinely exciting because of the competition and because of the stakes and because it was treated seriously.
Well, I disagree that this is what most people want. As I stated, I think that in people's nature, they want to see competition. They want to see true competition. That's what's exciting. That's sport, right? That's sports to a T. It's to be competitive. And if you're watching sports, you want to see competition. And anytime there's actual competition going on, it's always more exciting. That's why the playoffs are more exciting in the NBA, right? Because the defense tightens up. There's big plays that are made on good defense, on defense that's trying harder. The games are more meaningful in the win-loss column. It's because of competition. So I don't think that this is what people want to see. It's just the direction that the league has gone into for some reason. And I'm not sure why. The last thing I want to say about this too is I want to talk about the dunk contest for a second. I feel like the players owe it to the fans to have the most popular stars, or at least a few of the most popular stars or the best dunkers, represented in the dunk contest, in this competition. And this year it's like McClung and whatnot. It's 4 guys that not many fans really care about seeing in the dunk contest. But, you look back in the day when it was Jordan and Neek competing, and then when Kobe came into the league, Kobe, and then the early 2000s, you had Vince Carter, and you had all-stars like Jason Richardson participating in it, right? And, guys that were known for being great dunkers, like Desmond Mason wasn't an all-star, but what did you know about Desmond Mason, Andrew?
He could dunk.
He was a great dunker. He put on a show. Gerald Green wasn't an all-star, but you knew that his vertical was out of this world, and he was the guy that jumped up and caught an oop with his head above the rim, right? Everybody remembers that dunk. So, I feel like the players owe it to the fans who keep them in business, right? Who are the biggest reason why these players have a job. I feel like the players owe it to them to participate in these events and entertain. And it's the same thing with players resting constantly, right? Like you rarely ever see a star player play 70 games anymore. And they're just sitting out back-to-backs. There's constant rest days and everything. I'm sorry, but these fans pay to watch you play, right? And they're the ones who are helping keep the players keeping their job, keep the NBA league, the NBA going and everything. So it's a sad state for basketball today, and with the NBA in general, and it's frustrating.
I saw that the NBA is actually looking at possibly bringing in a games played requirement for the awards, similar to what they do for the league leaders in statistics. And I'd be for that, because how can you be the most valuable player if you're missing almost half the season? That to me,
absolutely not. I think it's ridiculous. And all-stars too, right? Like I know that they've done this in the past. I know that Yao Ming got a all-star nod that he probably shouldn't have because he barely played in that season. But I don't think that a player should be allowed to be an NBA all-star if they played 11 games, right? Or 13 or 14 games or something like that. So that's just my opinion. I know people are going to say, well, that's what fans want to see. Didn't you just say that, that's what fans want to see? No, they want to see the players playing throughout the NBA season, right? Up until NBA All-Star game. So then they can see them in that game. So availability, unfortunately, isn't, what it used to be.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, NBA-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community. You bring up the MJ versus Neek in the 88 dunk contest, for example. A great example of top players competing in the dunk contest and turning into a great showdown. And look, a lot of people bring up the Zach LaVine versus Aaron Gordon dunk contest as one of the best as well, and possibly the best. I actually agree with that. I think that was a fantastic contest, but it's very difficult to go past MJ versus Neek. And I'll plug some content here, Derek. I made that video, the 1988 dunk contest recreated in NBA Live 08 PC, or more accurately, the recap of that contest from the Dazzling Dunks and Basketball Bloopers tape. One of my favorite segments, obviously, and that was a very satisfying video to create, finally, after many years.
It's the best video you have ever made, in my opinion. I love all your videos. I watch your NBA 2K14 My Career series, the retro series, the ones where you narrate, the ones where you don't, etc. But as far as like top to bottom, having me hooked, with great footage, great real life sounds added to the video, real life commentary, everything. Nothing beats that 1988 dunk contest video that you posted. So if our listeners have not gone onto the NLSC YouTube and check that out, please do.
Absolutely. I do feel it is one of my best original content that I've made, up with some of the articles and podcasts that I'm most proud of. It's been on the to-do list for a while, and an idea that I've had, finally was able to put it into action. I want to make 2023 the year that I really cross off some of these ideas that I've had for a while, whether it's modding or articles or videos, Derek. I want to finally get around to them and make them a reality. That was one I was able to do, and I was very satisfied with how it turned out, and glad that people are enjoying it, glad that it resonated. But Live 08, it's funny because Live 08 I chose because I had the mods on hand to make that happen, with a work-in-progress Ultimate Jordan roster, that, as I've mentioned before. And because I was originally going to do NBA Live 2005, but didn't have the mods for it, so Live 08 PC turned out to be the better choice. And it's funny because I do prefer Live 2005 to 08. Although you and I did play some 08, and we actually connected with Stildo to have a three-player experience. And, of course, Parsec works out fantastic as it always does. The only drawbacks were Live 08 related, because that was a game that had some problems. Although Live 08 for PS3, and of course it came in on 360, what a jump from 07.
So yeah, that session that we had on NBA Live 08 for PS3, really interesting, because that's the first time that you, myself, and Stildo have connected on a game and played co-op all on the same team. And of course, Parsec worked amazing. It was working really well for you. It worked perfect for him. And we were able to hit the hardwood and just kind of try to win, like figure out the game, win, try to play the best we possibly could. And we didn't have to worry about connection issues or anything like that. Stildo had never played this game before, so he took a few threes that were runners because he was using the dunk button to take regular shots. But overall, I thought he played pretty well. He had a nice fadeaway with LeBron. He had a nice little hook shot in the post with Shaq and a couple dunks and everything. I think if the three of us were to revisit that again, I think we would perform much better, and we'd definitely pull out the W. I love the graphics on NBA Live 08. I love the dribbling control. It definitely has issues in relation to rocket dunks, like super fast animations where they shouldn't be super fast, phantom charging calls, which you got a couple of those, where you had the defender on your side with Vince Carter and you tried to finish and they called you for a weird random charging call.
So frustrating.
Yeah, there's issues where where you think that you have a open lane and then you're dragged into a defender and then you just brick it. There's some weird ball animations in that game where the ball just travels through the air super awkward and just clanks randomly off the rim and just takes this weird bounce. Like, there's just a lot of rough gameplay sequences, I think you would agree, in that game. But I think it's still fun to revisit. I think the mechanics are good enough to have some fun with it, and I'm not opposed to revisiting it again.
No, and of course that PS3 360 version is superior to PC, at least in my view. You may disagree there, and I get where you're coming from if you do, but the PC version, the PS2 version, of course, had the completely broken sim engine in Dynasty mode, which made it very hard for me to enjoy that, because, as you know, I like starting with real rosters and having those realistic statistics at least to begin with. It's got an issue where you can't, on the second free throw, you can't move into the lane until it hits the rim, and it's not the rule. It's obviously the the player at the free throw line can't break the line until it hits the rim, but you can't start moving and boxing out until the ball hits the rim. It's really awkward. And of course, they have some great tech with the quick strike dribbling in the PS3 360 version, which was taken from tech used in NBA Street Home Court, where the faster you move the stick, the faster your player dribbles, and you can make those really quick crossovers with that system in place. It's still the same freestyle control basically, but it's quick strike as the new name given to it because of that new tech they were using. And
you love that hesitation, though. I want to let everybody know.
Oh, the half spin,
yeah. For PS3 gets put on. Andrew will be on Twitter and he'll message me and he'll be like, "Oh my god, I love that hesitation."
I do that half spin, that Steve Smith like half spin move. Since the community event, absolutely loved it. Just hold up on the stick and do that move. The problem is with Live 08 on PS3 360 that you've probably noticed it when we're playing as well. When you're shooting around in that practice arena and you're making moves and going up for shots, sure, there's a couple of weird transitional animations when you're going into a dunk or a layup off the drive. That was a problem at the time and was still a problem with Live as of the last generation as well. But it still feels a lot better. But once you start getting on the floor with opponents and it's that the 5-on-5, and you've got a lot of two-man scenarios, two-man animations, with the collisions and getting stuck into those animations, it's harder to make those slick moves that you can make just shooting around. And again, that was a problem that Live still had, even as of the last generation.
Yeah, two things. One, the players all seem to move at the same speed in that game, and they don't move very fast. Fast breaks crawl, in my opinion, for the most part in that game. They move up the floor. The player movement is very strange up and down the floor, and it just feels like everybody's moving at the exact same speed. So that's one of the problems. The other problem is yes, absolutely, two-man animations really hurt the feel of that game because there's so many of them, and there's so many canned contact animations that happen when you attack the rim. So it makes attacking the rim not even fun most of the time.
And I think that's where the charging fouls come from as well, those can animations.
Oh yeah, definitely. I will say this, though. We did the 3-point contest. Now, there's no defenders there, so we didn't have to worry about that. We did the 3-point contest on NBA Live 08, and I used Ray Allen. You used Ben Gordon, one of your favorite players of all time.
Of course.
And we took on the computer, so there was 6 competitors. And you were cheering for me, and I appreciate that. Andrew got knocked out barely in the first round. He had 21. And I want to say Jason Terry advanced to face me in the finals. I think he had 22 or 23.
Yeah, 22. I called it. I said he's going to get 22. I saw him firing up and just like heating up, I should say, because he went last in that first round. And I thought, because we both went, the Jet's going to get us here. Jet's going to get me. You had 29 in the first round, so you were safe. But he just came in and he's just started hitting shots. I said, he's going to get 22. He's just going to edge me out. And the CPU did. What a middle finger. A classic middle finger from the CPU. 22.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what's funny in that game is actually I think Ray Allen's 82 on 3, and I think Ben Gordon is 86, which was surprising. I thought it would be reverse. But Ben Gordon was a hell of a shooter at that time. But tell me what your thought process was when I made it to the finals with Jason Terry, and we were like neck and neck.
Yeah, because as I said, you made 29, like a record right there in the first round. So I thought, you got this, you've got this. And then he went first in the final round and hit 20. Did he make 23 in that? He
made 23. Yeah, it was 23.
23. And then I thought, that's okay. You got 29 in the first round. You'll get at least 25, 26, and beat him. But you missed a couple on the first rack, and I think you said afterwards that your brother was commentating in the background and may have thrown you off there.
Every shot I was taking, he was being like, "That's good," or "early," or like "early" or "late," and I'm just like, I was like, "Shut up."
Like, not helping,
because it was messing with me. I was like, "You're not helping. Like just let me play." Yeah, so we ended up tying.
Yeah, you finished strong. You finished strong and tied it up and go to a tiebreaker, 24-second tiebreaker. And this is exciting for me to watch.
Yeah, I was scared because he had 9 in that 24-second tiebreaker, which is a pretty good score. And I think I beat him with 11. And that was a lot of fun. And how about the presentation on NBA Live '08 All-Star Weekend. The commentary, the graphics, the flames going up in the background, all of that stuff. Yeah, amazing. Just absolutely amazing presentation. It's way better than what we have on like NBA 2K23 overall.
Well, I actually, this past week, did the Friday 5 reasons that NBA Live had the best All-Star Weekend. I still say that across the board. The fact that it was a standalone mode is the big one, because you could play that at any time, enjoy it at any time, didn't have to simulate through the season to get there, which means you could also practice the mechanics. But to that end, the mechanics are some of the best for the dunk contest and three-point shootout. I think one of the things that I really appreciate about the three-point shootout in Live, apart from that great presentation, of course, is that the mechanics, they don't differ that much from the regular gameplay. They don't change up the timing on the jump shots. There's no strange mechanic that they have that's different from regular gameplay. You just pick up the ball and you time your shot. Which is funny, because Live 08 did actually take out shot timing on PS3 and 360 that year, and they brought it back, of course, in 09. But it's still there in the three-point shootout, and yeah, it just works so well. The presentation of All-Star Weekend, people say that NBA Live never did anything good, or was never any good. As I've said before, absolutely ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about if you say that. And they were innovating for a while there, and they did bring in the All-Star Weekend. And again, to my mind, they've done it better than anybody else before or since.
Yeah, it was super immersive participating in the three-point contest. Even you as a viewer said it was immersive.
Yeah.
Just like watching me compete after you were eliminated barely by Jason Terry, you were into it. And a lot of that has to do with the presentation and the mechanics. One thing that I noticed with NBA 2K22 and NBA 2K23 is there's a lot of sliding into when you like go and pick up the ball and shoot it. There's a ton of sliding when you try to go from rack to rack, and you like your players just kind of like sliding into position, and it just kind of like ruins the immersion, right? For me, it's just the presentation is just a lot better on those older Live games for our All-Star Weekend. The other game that you and I played was NBA 2K13. We played the PC version, and we played Blacktop, and it was me on Ben Gordon, you on Vince Carter, the Dallas version, and this was the Bobcats version of Ben Gordon. We went against Corey Maggette and Dion Waiters, and we ended up pulling out that game. I want to say the final score was like 23-21 or 24-22. But man, Blacktop used to be awesome in NBA 2K because they had the DJ in NBA 2K23, right? And it's almost like and one vibes. And the graphics look better in Blacktop even than they do in like the 5-on-5 action. And it was a really immersive experience on that as well. And I think that's just the gameplay holds up so well on NBA 2K13.
It really does. And of course, I've been playing a lot of 2K14, which is quite similar to 2K13, obviously. So I'm quite familiar with the feel of those games from around that era. I really enjoyed going back and playing that with you. And I do agree that Blacktop atmosphere is something special. My one complaint is that, and it's still a thing today in Blacktop, that it's really weird about when you select players and select and assign controls, that it always seems to go to the other player. It doesn't seem to allow you to assign a controller to a specific player properly, still, to this day.
I could not, for the life of me, get you to use Ben Gordon.
Yeah, weird.
So after a couple attempts, I was just like, screw it, I'm going to use Ben Gordon.
Yeah.
And I thought I did a pretty good job with him. I did a few nice ISO moves, which are really good in NBA 2K13, where you push like the circle button and it allows you to do like a sidestep or a step back, etc. And, I was able to utilize that button, and you hit a couple nice outside shots with him. I hit a few threes with him, a couple nice like drives where I got the guy on my side and finished strong at the hoop. And for those who don't know, Ben Gordon was completely ripped. Andrew knows this. He was a jacked player. And so like I always, when I use Ben Gordon, I always know that I have a strength advantage oftentimes over my defender. And then I thought I threw a couple of nice lobs to you with Vince where you threw it down. And you also had a nice McHale-esque move with Vince Carter where you threw an up fake and then a second up fake and the guy jumped in the air and then you finished it. And I know you were happy with that.
Oh, yeah.
But I also like the way the computer plays in that game. They're very smart. They're hard to cover.
Aggressive.
As a result. Yeah, they're very aggressive. Dion Waiters had a couple nice putback dunks in this game. Corey Maggette was pulling up from mid-range and knocking it down. I really like NBA 2K13. The gameplay is some of the best in basketball video game history. in my opinion, and that session was really fun.
I mean, we'll probably be getting into it as we talk about the annoying mechanics throughout basketball gaming history, but that was a game that came before. It does have signature skills, but it's before we really went overboard, or games rather went really overboard with badges and boosts and all those artificial elements that we've talked about so many times. And again, I'm sure we'll touch on shortly. In fact, I know we will, because I'm looking at some of the responses we have from the community right now. But it was before it went really into that meta game that we have now. And 2K14 had a little bit more with the signature skills as well. But again, that era of games predates that approach. So I think that's why the gameplay holds up so well. On top of solid mechanics, obviously. But you did use Ben Gordon really well. It was very competitive back and forth, as we said. But then I loved it because we were taking it, we were being careful with it and just going tit for tat with them, basket for basket. But then you were just like with Ben Gordon, you know what? I'm going to end the game. Big three, splash, 2-pointer in the Blacktop mode, obviously, to win that game. So yes, you came through with Ben Gordon there.
Well, we were just trading baskets with them for so long.
Yeah,
and they were doing such a good job scoring on us. Yeah, so the score got up to like 22-22, and we should have ended it before, like 22-22 or something, or 23-23 or something like that. So I think we got like a rebound, and you kicked it out to me or something like that, and I was just like, screw it, we need a 2-pointer or else this game is going to last all night. And I was able to knock it down, and it splashed through the net, and we won the game. Those highlights are up on @D43G on Twitter. I did post the game highlights, and a lot of people are enjoying those. And our good friend King J Mace loves it, of course, because he's all about Blacktop. He's all about his Elite Street League on NBA 2K23. And I love it how somebody asked about the DJ in the game in the comments, and they were like, is this a mod or something like that? And King J Mace immediately replied and was like, because he knows his history, because he loves Blacktop. He always has. He loves that play style. And immediately responded. It was like, back then, on Blacktop, they had the DJ, and it was a really cool part of the game. So appreciate King J Mace for sticking to playing what he loves to play, right? He's never deviated. Yeah. He plays what he wants, and he's found a community that will do that with him as well, with the Elite Street League. But yeah, no, that was really fun. And I agree with you. I think 2K13, 2K14, 2K12, 2K11, etc. Even going back to the original NBA 2K. So let's go like all the way back. Those games just feel cleaner a lot of the time on the sticks. They feel less artificial. Let's put it that way. They feel like you don't have all of the artificial boosts, the badges, all of that stuff. You feel like you can kind of just play basketball, right? And that was the beauty of a lot of those older games, and I'm including 2K13 in that, is you just feel like it's fun. Like it's just you're able to focus on the basketball portion of the game and have some fun.
Well, that's the funny thing, is that people talk about stick skills and skill gaps these days, but if you go for that pure stick skills and skill gap experience, then really it's the older games that do it, because they don't have all the artificial boosts, as we've said before.
Exactly, and that's why I've said that skill gap in today's games is the worst it's been in basketball game history, in my opinion, because of the sheer number of badges. I think there's 80 now. Yeah, the sheer number of artificial boosts, the sheer number of things that can make it so somebody who doesn't play as well on the sticks, who only knows how to cheese and abuse badges and game mechanics and everything, that they can blow somebody out that just knows more about basketball. It is even better on the sticks. So yeah, I think that it's the worst skill gap has ever been.
Which is ironic, again, because we do have that competitive scene nowadays, and everybody's going on about the skill gaps, and these mechanics create skill gaps, and a lot of mechanics have just been gimmicky or indeed annoying, which is what we're talking about this week.
Yeah. So I did want to, before we get into that segment, because that's going to take up the rest of the show, I did play 3 games against Stildo on our 94-95 season for NBA 2K19 using the amazing 94-95 retro season mod. And man, we're having so much fun. I just got to tell you. So the first game was Stildo's Magic, and before this game he was 18-6 versus me with the Nuggets. And this Nuggets team for me is a dream. It's Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, Dale Ellis, Jalen Rose, LaFonso Ellis, Dikembe Mutombo, Robert Pack, Rodney Rogers. It has everything I need to compete. I got shooters, I got slashers, I got a 6'7" shooting guard, so I have size. I have Rodney Rogers, who can stretch the floor on the bench. I have Mutombo swatting shots and finishing around the rim and the ability to hit half hooks. I have LaFonso Ellis, who I can face up in the mid-range with and make moves with either in the post or around the basket, etc. And it was a very close game. I think at one point it was 105-105 with just like a minute to go. But I ended up pulling out that win and giving him his 7th loss. And I sent you a highlight of me with LaFonso Ellis where I face up on my guy in the mid-range and I drive baseline and do a very Jordan-like layup and finish it on the opposite side of the basket. I think that might be the best layup that I have ever seen in NBA 2K19.
It looked great, and there was no clipping, or no obvious clipping that I could see, and just the positioning of the Fonz when he went up for that Jordan-esque layup. Yeah, that was really slick. I said slick, very slick, because that looked awesome.
And I want to point something out too, and I don't think that NBA 2K19 is the best for shooting. I still think it's better in 2K17. I think it's better than 2K14, 13. Hell, it's better in 2K7 a lot of the time as far as like straight up and down shots. But I will say this, shots on the move on NBA 2K19 can be really good depending on which animation is assigned to the player. And I was absolutely torching Stildo with Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, where I would get like a first step on him and then quickly pull up on the move and smoke a J, or like spin off of him around half court if he was pressuring me and then just go right up into a 3. It felt like I was really using Abdul-Rauf, and he led my team in scoring, and that was super fun. I had my hands full with Dennis Scott and Nick Anderson like stretching the floor, and of course Shaq is just a monster who had 30 points, but I was able to contain him a little bit with Mutombo. I thought Penny, I did a pretty good job of doubling Penny whenever they tried to post him up. Whenever Stildo tried to post him up on Abdul-Rauf, I also put Dale Ellis on Penny for part of the game in order to, combat those post-ups that he was trying. But that was just a super fun team to use and a fun game to win. Then we played Supersonics versus Nets, and at the start of the game, he was absolutely torching me with Coleman, but I figured it out, and I ended up winning that game pretty easily. I think I won by about 20. And then we played again, and it was his Magic again versus the Indiana Pacers. And I love me some Reggie Miller in video games, Andrew.
Of course.
And he texted me before the game. He goes, I have a really bad feeling that I'm going to get torched by Reggie Miller. I figured out his shot probably about in the second quarter because we do user timing. And I think I scored about 34 to 36 points with him. I think I hit about 7 or 8 threes in the game. But there was a moment in this game, and just to let you know, the Pacers are really fun to use because they also have a lot. They have Mark Jackson at point, Reggie Miller at shooting guard, Derek McKee at the small forward, Dale Davis at the power forward, and then Antonio Davis at the power forward on the bench, Rick Smits, LaSalle Thompson, Vern Fleming, like Byron Scott. Byron Scott's super fun to use in the video game. So like they're a fun, deep team, and you can compete with them. But there was a play where I want to say Stildo was down 2 or it was tied possibly. And it was only like a minute or so left in the fourth quarter. And Stildo found Shaq for a huge 2-handed dunk and then stole it from me on the inbounds right after, and then threw an alley-oop to Shaq from Penny, and he just threw it down on me again. And it was probably the coolest and most realistic play of the entire season. And Stildo lost his mind, of course, when it happened. And you can just picture this sequence happening in real life, and Marv Albert losing his mind and the crowd going crazy because it was in Orlando, etc. It's moments like that. And I said this on the last podcast, where something happens in a video game and it's so exciting and it's so realistic that just everything, it all comes together, and it's like, this is why we play, right? So he ended up doing those back-to-back plays. He ended up winning that game. And he called me right after, and he was just super excited. So that is what it's all about. All 3 games were super fun today. He's great to play against, and we had a blast.
No, that season continues to be. I can just see how much you enjoy that from you talking about it, and of course the highlights that you share. And as I've said before, such a memorable season, the '95 campaign, and playing with those players that we loved watching growing up is obviously adds to that franchise experience. And yeah, as you say, it's what it's all about. You want to enjoy your time on the virtual hardwood, and of course we have our critiques. We're going to share some very shortly, but when it just all goes like that, and you've got a game that you love so much. You just can't put it down.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is we played a couple games and we were like, we got to play a third.
Let's play some more, right?
Yeah. And that's old school. That's the way we were growing up, right? That was you on NBA Live 96. That's me on like the original NBA 2K. And, you when you were playing NBA Live 10. And then you and I when we were playing NBA Live 10 last year. Remember how many games we played? We were like, we just couldn't get enough of it. And that's what it's all about. So I love that I can have this shared experience with him. I won't forgive him for killing me with Tree Rollins last game, but it was a Rick Smits Tree Rollins duel in the third quarter. And if Tree Rollins hadn't been, able to perform on such a high level defensively and offensively in that third quarter, still wouldn't have won that game. But we were laughing about it because that's the worst version of Tree Rollins. This is end of his career, Tree Rollins. But
player coach that's also Tree how Rollins, video basically. Game. Yeah, he's a player coach. That's how video. Yeah. Yeah,
but that's how video game legends are also made, right?
Absolutely.
So that's another reason why we play is to, maybe do the impossible or, show out with a player that wasn't known to show out in real life. And, a lot of that is also, overcoming adversity. There's a reason why you're going to that player and you're not going to your star, right? Maybe your star is covered a little bit better. Maybe he's not performing. So now you need to turn to this guy who, maybe averages 3 or 4 points per game in that season, and he takes you to the promised land. So that's another fun part about basketball gaming.
I mean, I did consider using Adam Morrison in the three-point shootout, but then I saw his rating of 61. I don't know why, this is an NBA Live 08, I should say, in the three-point shootout. And I don't know why Dirk has a three-point rating of 69 in Live 08's default rosters. That was definitely off
Some of the ratings are weird in there, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of the ratings are strange, yeah.
But yeah, I did shy away from Adam Morrison. Otherwise, definitely would have used the stash.
So I want to let our community know, too, that the NBA Live 08 PS3 three-point shootout that we were just discussing, where I was on Ray Allen and Andrew used Ben Gordon, etc., that video is going to be up on the NLSC YouTube by the time this podcast gets released. So make sure to check that out because you'll love the presentation, you'll love the action, and I think it's a great video.
I'm looking forward to rewatching it because again, it was even fun being a spectator, and I think modes like that were great for that party atmosphere, Derek, and multiplayer. Just everyone gets on the controls, and everyone controls a player, and you can have again up to 6 people participating in that if you like, or 2 people each controlling 3 players if you prefer. Such a great multiplayer experience.
And the way you were reacting to it, it felt like you were here. Like, I think that's what's really cool, too, about Parsec is because you and I were both able to participate in that three-point contest online, and we were able to talk on Twitter while it was happening and everything. It felt like you were here watching it locally and, like, rooting for me. And I think that that's just how awesome Parsec is and how awesome it works. And just I'm amazed with some of the technology that we have today and what we're able to do. So for the community question, I asked basketball gamers, what are some annoying mechanics that you have experienced in basketball video games? And then when thinking of mechanics, think of ones that made you put the game down, curse at the screen, sigh, etc.
And I think we can all relate to that. I think we've all had those mechanics in games that sometimes we can get used to them and make them work as best as possible, but others that we're just like, this is not good.
So before we get to some of the community's responses, I wanted to go over some of the mechanics that Andrew and I have found annoying in the past. And I know that a lot of these will resonate with the community, especially based on the responses that we got. That's perfect evidence of that. So before I get into a couple of mine, what do you got?
I'm going to throw out a very recent one. The automatic rebounding in NBA Live 19. That was really frustrating.
No, absolutely. this is a complaint that my brother and I had even when the demo was out before the official release of the game, where it felt like you had absolutely no control over the rebound. The player would, if there was a jump at the rim, the ball would just go to whatever player the game like predestined it to go to. And you just really had absolutely it felt like you had no control over the outcome.
It was very contrived, yeah, and that's not what you want to feel in a game. I mean, obviously with basketball games to this day, there are some moments that are kind of canned, whether it's going into a dunk animation or layup animation, whatever. But and some of the blocks around that time as well felt very contrived and canned. They look nice, and the canned animations ensure that they do look nice. But yeah, it felt very phony, the rebounding going up automatically. The 3 shoot buttons in NBA Live 07. Now, I will defend to a point splitting the shoot button into 2 in Live 2004 and through to 2005 and 06. I think it worked fine in those games for the time as a way of expanding shooting controls. However, when they went to the 3 shoot buttons in 07, it was just overkill. Absolutely overkill, because you've got to now think about which of the 3 buttons you want to hit to make the exact move you want, a dunk, a layup, or a jump shot. And sometimes in the heat of gameplay and the thick of competition, you don't have time to move your thumb around to hit the right button or to think about which one you want to do. Look at Stildo having not played Live 08 before, just pressing what is now the shoot button in 2K out of habit, and it was the dunk layup button in Live 08. So it does have problems, but now just add another one to the mix with the 3 buttons in 07. And it's funny because on the surface, having 3 different buttons is a more straightforward approach to what we currently have with either the shot stick and the button, the left stick, and the sprint control, which is a modifier, that you have to press those 3 in conjunction with each other to make a specific move. However, it's actually easier, because you think about it, Derek, where are your fingers on the buttons and the shoulder buttons and the sticks when in a modern 2K? Those are all spread out, and you can keep them there, hovering over those buttons, ready to push and make that advanced move. Whereas again, back in the day in 07, with that 3-button approach, you had to move your thumb around and immediately realize, I've got to hit triangle or Y, or I've got to hit square or X, or I've got to hit this right button. If I don't, it's going to go into a really funky animation that's probably going to make me throw up a floater from 3-point range or whatever. So it's funny how on the surface the current control scheme sounds more complicated. You got to hold this trigger and move your stick this way and move the other stick the other way. But it's in the flow of gameplay. You don't have to think about it. You're not moving your hands around the controller, your thumbs around the controller. So that 07, having those 3 shoot buttons, and it's funny because 3 pass buttons works really well, but 3 shoot buttons didn't. And moving away from that was absolutely the right call.
I think that in theory, it made sense. I think when you say, I want to give the end user complete control, right?
Exactly.
I want them to be able to control their destiny. I want them to be able to decide when they want to do a dunk, when they want to do a layup, when they want to take a regular shot, etc. In theory, it makes sense. But like you said, in execution, as far as you're not, being able to think exactly like a real basketball player, you're not able to control the ball with your hands, and you have to push buttons, right? So being able to, and this isn't just like saying for like a casual gamer, this is for advanced gamers too, having to think about that on the fly during real game action, which button you're going to push. And there's 3 choices for that different, situation and whatnot. It's just absolutely overkill. And I completely agree. That one was actually on my list as well, but now I can scratch it off because you already brought it up. So I know you're going to agree with this one. NBA Live 2002 rebounding. And I'm gonna let NBA Live 2001 off the hook here because it was first. Yeah, it was a rebuild. It was the first game with the new motion system, but still, the NBA Live 2001 rebounding is better than Live 2002. And I've played a lot of both, and while it has issues, it's still better. But NBA Live 2002, the fact that the best way to get rebounds, the best strategy to get rebounds, and in turn win games, is to let the ball hit the floor and just walk into the ball.
To not jump, yeah.
That is a huge red flag. The fact that you can't jump for rebounds with confidence at all, and that your success rate when you try to jump for a rebound, even if you think you timed it perfectly right, that your success is like 10 to 20%. That is a huge red flag, and I think it's a super annoying mechanic, and it hurts that game in a big way because rebounding is a huge part of basketball. If you think about it, how many rebounds happen each game? 70, 80, and whatnot. There's a lot of missed shots. So I think it's one of the most annoying mechanics that I've ever experienced in a game, and it definitely hurts the action.
A lot of old games had too many flat-footed rebounds and collecting loose balls off the floor, which does happen, obviously, in basketball. I mean, it's not every rebound is contested and won in the air, but just too many flat-footed rebounds and scoop-off-the-floor rebounds in older games. And yeah, 2002 and 2001 were definitely some of the worst for that.
Next one, Andrew. NBA Live 2003 bumper car mechanics. Super annoying. And it would often make you just drop the ball and for no reason. And that happened constantly in Live 2003. That combined with the pace of the game just made for some crazy, wild, ridiculous, and frustrating action at times. I still enjoy NBA Live 2003, but the moment that you try to get super competitive with Live 2003 and, you're trying to win, then that's when the game can get super frustrating. And you and I connected on Live 2003 and had a lot of fun playing the NBA All-Star game because it was a loose action on like a lower difficulty level. But I know how much those bumper car mechanics bother you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's the collisions were very primitive, obviously, and even for the time they were very annoying. And in fact, a lot of older games as well, the losing the ball when you run into the defender or just get too close to a defender and you've lost the ball. You're not even poking at it, they're not even going for the steal, but you just lose it too easily, or you run into each other and go flying. Those bumper car mechanics, as you say, is frustrating in those older games. And of course, Live 2003, the big booming blocks, I mean, they're kind of fun if you're not taking the game too seriously, but definitely not the right tone for a sim game.
No, absolutely not. And I know you're going to agree with this one because we revisited it recently. NBA Live 2005, stopping on the fast break, stopping to catch passes.
Yeah.
One of the most annoying mechanics that really impacts flow. And it's very unrealistic. And it's not just Live 2005, but I'm going to use that as the example here because NBA Live 2004 was not as bad in this area.
And also it's the one place where 2005's gameplay is weak. It's a very strong game otherwise, apart from the fast break logic and catch animations. 09 PS2, another recent one that we revisited as of late. Same thing there.
Exactly. So, but let's go back to Live 2005. So, because we're going to use this as the example, it's the whole you pass it up, and instead of your player continuing forward, he stops to catch the pass. And when this happens, it ruins the flow. It allows the defense to get back. It thwarts the fast break, and it's just incredibly unrealistic. I've talked about it on the show so many times before. Basketball is a beautiful sport when it's played right. And in video games, it's a beautiful experience when it's programmed right to mimic the real game. And that is something that is incredibly unrealistic because if you think about playing basketball and whatnot, when you catch a pass, oftentimes you are moving forward, especially when you're on the fast break. And the goal is to keep moving forward because you're trying to outrun your opponent. You're trying to beat him down the floor. So it's a mechanic that doesn't make sense. It ruins solo fast breaks. It ruins 2-on-1s, 3-on-1s even, etc. And we experience that big time on our co-op session.
Absolutely. Another one I'll throw out there that I know a lot of people have brought up in the comments and the responses on Twitter as well is the lack of proper dribbling controls in those early 2Ks, or the old approach to isomotion, and Live was just doing it so much better at that time. For any other drawbacks they had during that era, the dribbling mechanics, the dribbling controls were so much better having that control. Once they brought that in 2003, the right stick dribbling. And of course, we say right stick dribbling. There was other right stick moves as well. Defensive crouch, hands up on defense, and trying to steal it with the left or right hand, depending on the movement of the stick. That it wasn't just dribbling, but it was huge because in those early games, having a dribbling button was itself a huge improvement, but you'd hit it and it wouldn't necessarily be the move you wanted. It was whatever the game thought was contextually appropriate, which sometimes it was and sometimes it wasn't, or you spun in the wrong direction or whatever. So not having that much control over dribbling, especially when that started to become a thing in games, is definitely a drawback. Not having that control in the early 2Ks.
Yeah, it's all about control, right?
Yeah.
I think the thing is that it's the whole reason why you were able to move on to NBA 2K once they implemented right stick dribbling in NBA 2K13.
Exactly.
The ISO motion dribbling, you did have some control, but at the same time, I'm talking about like NBA 2K12, NBA 2K11, at the same time, you could easily fumble that control because of the way the mechanics worked, and it could impact the on-court experience. It's not as user-friendly at all as the right stick. And then you had games that were super primitive even before the ISO motion, games like, NBA 2K10, where you had like the crossover button and you had the spin move button, and that was pretty much it. So you were like, okay, so I can do like 2 moves, right? 2 or 3 moves, and they're, wildly animated at times, and I don't really have much control over it. So I can definitely agree with that. My next one, and I know you're going to agree with this as well, Live 06 360 camera options.
Yeah. No, that's
some of the worst.
The limitations of the camera options in 06 PS3. I mean, we've discussed this before, that we feel that 06 for 360 was pretty strong on the sticks. Some people disagree, but give it a go, and you'll see that it's actually quite solid. The presentation, the graphics, great for the time, etc. But the lack of features that were just stripped from the prior gen version and the PC version, the PC port, and not having the full Dynasty mode, not having retro jerseys and the classic uniforms, and not having Freestyle Superstars, which itself had some issues, but was certainly a step in the right direction as far as trying to implement some kind of advanced shooting and signature moves. So it was an attempt at the time that the 360 version just completely skipped over. Not having instant replay, not having all those camera views, you've got to enjoy the view that you play from in a basketball game. You need to have that view of the action that allows you to see what you're doing and to really have that right control over the player.
There was no real good broadcast view in that game. Everything was super zoomed in. There was no really good 2K style view. It was just not very good camera view options in general. I think the pace in NBA Live 06 also is a little bit of an annoying mechanic on the next generation of consoles. It felt like this very sluggish. I think I put the in-game speed in the sliders up to 100 for us, or something close to that.
At least just 80 to try to, we were playing on, yeah.
It was like 80 or 85, just to try to like make it resemble more real life pace. And that's why I say when, there's people out there that are like, oh, well, NBA Live was always arcade. They always shot for arcade, and it's always about this unrealistic action. No, you don't understand the history, and you probably haven't played a lot of those past games, because what were they going for in NBA Live 06 for next gen?
Yeah, it was definitely realism. Sim. Yeah, absolutely.
They were going for sim. And same thing when they implemented all the signature styles on NBA Live 07 for next gen, when they finally brought that back. NBA Live 06 for the PS2 gen, all the signature style, freestyle superstars, all of that. They were going for real NBA sim. And that's a perfect example of that, is that slower pace on NBA Live 06, which is the exact opposite of arcade. So I'm going to go over one more and I'll throw it back to you. NBA Live 08, overall sluggish and crab-like movement. I think it's super annoying to look at. And at the same time, it's kind of frustrating on the floor, because the gameplay is pretty sluggish. And then at the same time, all the players are moving at basically the same speed. And I just think it hurts the pace and flow of the game.
Another couple I'll throw out here, of course, the press steal to foul. as I said before, when you're going for steals and it just feels like whatever you press, even if it's just a single press at a pretty good time, suddenly your player is just wildly slapping at the ball or even wrapping up the defender. And like, no, if I want to intentionally foul, there are ways of doing that. And I'd be mashing the button or hitting the intentional foul control in games that have an intentional foul control, as many of them have over the years. But no, the press steal to foul is absolutely frustrating. Also, free throws. You know, I've got a couple of favorite free throw methods, including, of course, the classic T-meter in NBA Live. There were some games that did really weird things, really weird variations on the T-meter. You remember Fox Sports NBA Basketball 2000, that really weird version they had with the ball, and you're trying to stop it on both sides? That was just so confusing.
We experienced that, and I don't think we made a free throw in that game.
No,
it was that frustrating. And it reminds me, too, like the NBA Inside Drive 2003, 2004, etc., that those free throw mechanics are absolutely annoying and terrible. And I think my brother and I, in our season on Inside Drive 2003, we're over 30 games, and I think our team free throw percentage is like 40%, because when you play it on the hardest level, it's just almost impossible to get the ball into the two circles that you're supposed to on that little meter that they have on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. The original NBA 2K has some of the worst. You wanted to throw your controller when we were having that session.
At the end, I wasn't even trying.
You gave up. Yeah, you just kept missing them on purpose. You're like, I'm not even going to try this.
No, I'll just try and get the offensive board and get the 2 points that way if I can.
Yeah, the green arrows, using the bumpers to try to get the arrows into the center and then releasing the ball. In theory, it would make sense, but it's so sensitive. Like I can get used to it. Like if I'm playing solo and not co-op or anything like that, if I'm playing solo, I can hit most of my free throws. That doesn't mean that I like the mechanic, right? I think it's way too sensitive. It's super frustrating. Sometimes you just want to like miss it on purpose so you can get on with the game. So that is some of the worst free throw mechanics in basketball video game history.
And I want to point out something here as well, because as you said, you can get used to it, you can make it work. But just because you can make a mechanic work doesn't make it a good mechanic. And we've seen some people hitting back, again, this whole skill gap and everything these days in the competitive scene. And people saying that, if you don't like the shot aiming in recent... Was it 2K21 that had the shot aiming? It was 2K21, wasn't it?
Did. Yeah. I believe it was 2K21, yeah.
Yeah. And people didn't like it. And of course, it brought out the Get Good crowd that, I love them so much. But people were saying it's a case of just getting good and it's separating the bad players from the good players. First of all, that's an elitist point of view. I mean, yes, the competitive scene, you do need to have great stick skills ideally you should have the great stick skills to succeed in the online arena and level up to be an elite player. But to say that games shouldn't be accessible, or that everyone, if you don't like a mechanic, you just suck at the game, is just such a toxic attitude. Because as you said, you can get used to that clunky free throw mechanic in the original 2Ks, but it doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean that it's a well-designed mechanic, even if it did have a good intentions, good idea behind it. And to that point, there's a lot of people who dislike shot aiming said, no, I can make it work. I just think it's terrible. In fact, one of the problems is that once you mastered it, players were making shots from 40 feet, turnaround fadeaways from 40 feet, because they knew exactly how to abuse that mechanic. And look, I know it's a bit of a meme when I bring up Bart versus the Space Mutants, Derek, but for me, as I've said before, it's why I have that as my go-to example of bad mechanics. That is a terribly designed platform game, even for its time, because you already had Super Mario Brothers doing a much better job as a platformer in the 8-bit era. I can play that game. I have nostalgia for it. But those mechanics are so broken, so badly designed, even for the time, that I can acknowledge that is a badly designed game, and it's why it makes so many bad NES games lists. But I can make it work and enjoy it for the novelty of the other aspects, and the fact I'm a big Simpsons fan, that it's got that novelty aspect to it. But man, those mechanics are broken. The fact that I can make it work and get it through levels in that game does not mean they are good mechanics, and it's the same for basketball gaming as well.
This is a perfect time for me to bring up the NBA 2K18 blow-by issue.
Yes.
I can do it. I can master it. I scored like 50 points and a half using it just by ISOing Hassan Whiteside at the three-point line and just running forward and then just scoring over and over and over again. And that's with defensive sliders jacked up and everything. oh, I can absolutely have success with it. I have too much success with it, right? And the problem is that just because I have success with it doesn't mean that it's a good mechanic. And NBA 2K18 blow-bys, which was admitted in the NBA 2K19 blog, the preview for NBA 2K19, the blow-bys in 2K18 were a huge problem. And they knew it during the game's cycle while it was the current 2K. And that's why NBA 2K19's defense was such a focus, it was to fix that issue and whatnot. So yeah, completely agree. Just because you have success with a mechanic doesn't mean that it's good for the game or works right, etc. So yeah, I'm glad actually you brought that up. And of course, no NLSC podcast is complete without you bringing up Bart versus the Space Mutants.
Absolutely. And I could also bring up Bart versus the World. Same mechanics, same horrible mechanics. But for basketball games also, I mentioned Freestyle Superstars for Live 06. Look, it was that step towards having diva player control and signature moves and everything, but it was overpowering. There were better solutions that came along. It was a stepping stone. And some of these mechanics were ultimately stepping stones towards better solutions, and that was what we wanted to see. But it doesn't mean that even the better ones could still be annoying at times, and a lot of people had their problems with Freestyle Superstars, even if they recognized that they were a stepping stone and a step in the right direction, that it still wasn't quite the solution that they wanted, and that's an important distinction to make. And this is the kind of critique that's important in basketball gaming, Derek.
Yeah, and I wasn't a huge fan of Live 06 Freestyle Superstars. And the reason is because I thought that it was overpowering, and I thought that it made the user feel like they had to use it on every single possession instead of just playing basketball. But that brings me to our next game that this shouldn't even be brought up because the whole game is mechanically destroyed and terrible. NBA Live 07 for the Xbox 360. The rocket dunks, the awkward animations, the unrealistic animation transitions, the weird dribbling where looks like a parachute is coming out the player's back when you're trying to accelerate forward. It's like trying to simulate, I don't know, wind going through the player's jersey. Just that whole game is mechanically, in my opinion, awful for a basketball video game.
Just the underlying tech in 07. You look at the way it transitions from a driving animation into a dunk or a layup, and the way it has to warp you to the right side of the rim, warp you to the right position to actually go into that animation. It's also why animation variety and contextual animations are so important in games, that if you don't have enough animations from where a player is on the floor, like under the rim, that they can't step back and make that layup or step back and go up for a dunk, or just go straight up for a dunk. It has to be a running dunk. That's a big problem with Live over the years as well, that too many dunks were big running highlight dunks rather than just simple dunks around the rim and just going up for a quick flush and so forth. Just having that animation variety and having those transitional animations be smooth is so important. And we've seen, and people say, "Oh, Live 07 sucks," which is a fair comment, a fair blanket statement to make. Don't get me wrong, but why does it suck? Why do those animations suck? Because you can make it so it looks, as I've said before, okay. And that's being generous still.
I don't think you can make NBA Live 07 for the Xbox 360 look okay.
Well,
I've tried. I think maybe in like a 5-second clip. Like there was a clip on
in
NBA
isolation,
Live 07.
Yes,
yeah. Like it was like a 5-second clip where I did the triple threat and burst with Jason Richardson, and I threw it down in traffic, and it wasn't the worst looking rocket dunk animation. So yeah, in like a 5 or 6 second cherry picked clip, I can probably make Live 07 look like a playable game.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. And in the temple, if you approach the rim, if you approach the hoop from the right angle and hit layup or dunk, because again, you've got those 3 buttons, at the right time, from the right angle, it will look okay. As a tech, and that's the thing, like a tech demo, you can show that off and in a 5 to 10 second clip, and it will look okay. It will look like everything worked as it's supposed to. But if you come from the wrong angle, and of course you often can't come from the precise angle when in 5-on-5 gameplay because of the 2-man animations, and then it'll just trigger whatever animation it needs to at the time and just warp your player into whatever position it needs to be to complete that animation at the rim. Yeah, it's why having that underlying tech is so important. A good underlying tech is so important. Enough animations to suit every situation, or most situations, so that you don't have to warp into these really weird positions just to make the animation play out properly, the finishing animation. So 07, I think, is one of the best examples of how that lack of a proper motion system or a good motion system across the board. Because, look, if you're just running around in the temple with your player, again, it doesn't look too bad, and you can see that your player is actually moving in a complete 360, whereas before they were snapping to 45-degree angles. There is some semblance of improved tech there, but there's so much of it that doesn't work, and the animation, it's a perfect study of why animation variety is so important.
When I get into the hangar on NBA Live 07 on 360, I notice the problems immediately. The animation transitions are absolutely horrible. The game almost looks like it's an under 30 FPS. It's a complete mess. I do have a few more before we get to the community's responses, because I do want to get to those. NBA 2K10 and NBA Live 10 post play. I think that the mechanics in the post are super limited. I think that overall trying to operate in the post on those two games is pretty annoying. I think it's also annoying on NBA Live 16 for similar reasons, and NBA Live 15, you almost feel like you can only just catch the ball in the post on those games and just push the shoot button with the left stick facing a certain direction, and then just hope that you can get the right animation. There's just a lack of post mechanics in those games. And of course, you and I love playing in the post and out of the post and whatnot. And unfortunately, in those games, it's just not a strong part of the game.
So one that we've been talking about a bit off air, and of course we've talked about on previous shows as well, having revisited NBA Live 10 and NCAA Basketball 10 as well, the alley-oops in that game, just the way they, and in general, alley-oops not going to the player that you want at the rim, they're just going to somebody else on the other side of the court, or they're going to somebody in the mid-range or something ridiculous like that. Live 10 is one of the prime examples of the worst of it. When an alley-oop works out in Live 10, you feel like celebrating. Remember that Birdman one we got?
Yeah, you shot me a message on Twitter immediately after that, super excited that we actually completed an alley-oop and that it actually looked halfway decent.
And that is a problem with Live 10. It was there in NCAA Basketball 10 as well. But yeah, even some earlier games, just you got the player right there at the hoop, the teammate right there at the hoop, and you're aiming the stick towards them, and you hit the alley-oop button, and by all logic, it should go to them, but instead it goes to somebody on the other side, or it's a very easy lob, but it sails over their head. And this is kind of getting into another problem, so I'll try and keep it on track here. But I know you have to have moments where things go awry, because that is sim, and that is part of the challenge, that you need to be precise, and sometimes NBA players aren't. They do mess up. But so many moments where it's a contrived turnover or a contrived botch, a contrived blooper of missing the alley-oop or tossing it out of bounds or whatever, that you kind of need it, but it feels very phony, because you're like, a player should make that. A player should get that. That's a player who should be able to grab that lob and go up, and they're not even trying, or it just feels very phony, very contrived that you've blown that alley-oop like that.
So this is one of the problems with NBA 2K19, obviously not with alley-oops, because I think alley-oops work pretty well in that game. But those moments where you make a pass and the receiver is just completely wide open under the hoop, and the defender is, who's supposed to be covering her, the nearest defender, is at like the free throw line. And in real life, if you were making that pass, or you were on the side of someone's team that was making that pass, etc., the passer would lob it over the defender, and we would just get a layup. Like, there's no way the person making that pass in real life in the NBA or almost at any level of basketball would not be able to make that pass. But in NBA 2K19 and in the newer 2Ks, even 2K23, 2K22, you hit the pass button and it goes directly to the computer who's standing at the free throw line. It's like, I had no control over this, right? No matter, like, the game just can't recognize that situation in real basketball terms. So the ball just transfers to the computer, they go down the other way, and you're frustrated because you're like, that was an easy pass that anybody in real life would have been able to make. Same with passes that, and I know this is on your list, that just transfer to the computer. Like if you're just trying to do like a routine post up And this happens also in NBA 2K19, 2K20, 2K21, 2K22, etc. And instead of going to the hand of the receiver, it transfers to be a canned steal for the computer.
You can see the trajectory change in midair.
You can see the trajectory of the ball. It's just like a canned moment that you had absolutely no control over. Then there's the plays where you grab a defensive rebound off the glass and you start heading down floor and you outlet it to a teammate and this happened in the most recent game twice to me that I was playing against Stildo on 2K19. And your receiver is only about 15 to 20 feet in front of you, if that. And you throw them a pass. There's no defender around him, and it just goes sailing over his head. And it's like, I make this pass effortlessly in men's league. This is made in rec all the time. All ages, basically, of people that are playing basketball at any level can make this pass. But in NBA 2K, it's a turnover.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to be using NBA players, professional basketball players, and it's a turnover. So, yeah, those situations can get super frustrating.
And, I mean, any contrived moment. Rebounding, as we've mentioned, yes, it's frustrating to scoop up the floor. It's also frustrating when you go up to grab the board, but you see it just clip through your hands and get sucked into the hands of an opponent because they've got higher rebounding ratings. And, yes, perhaps they should be grabbing more boards than you, but that was your board. You grabbed that, but it's the game has decided, no, it's just going to pass right through your hands or just, even, again, the trajectory change in midair to go around and clip and warp into the opponent's hands. And some games are better at disguising that, but when they aren't, it feels very phony.
Yeah, 100%. Before we get to the community's responses, I'm going to rattle off some of because I've talked mostly about my annoying mechanics in NBA Live's history, touched on a couple 2K games, but not too much. Some of the annoyances that I've had with 2Ks going back to NBA 2K16, and I know that you've experienced these as well, and so much of our community has. NBA 2K16 trailer freeze. It seems like it was always open. So basically, let's say Dirk Nowitzki was the guy passing the ball in, and you would head up court, and all you would have to do is pass it backwards to Dirk Nowitzki, and as soon as he crossed half court, and he's wide open for a three at the top of the key. And this was basically available all the time, even if you were playing on Hall of Fame. And I can promise you that my oldest brother Mark abused it constantly because he used the Dallas Mavericks for our season, the Dark Dallas Mavericks from 02-03. So that was one of the super annoying things in recent games. 2K17, and I want to get your thoughts on this because I know you remember it. The CPU defender just moving out of the way when you're bringing up the ball, like the wing defender, and you just have an open lane to the hoop or a wide open three. It happens all the time in NBA 2K17, and it's super frustrating. And you have to use icon switching if you're on defense in order to grab that player and try to bring them back in bounds or back into position. And if you're playing on broadcast, a lot of times it's too late by the time they get up the court and whatnot. So that was a pretty big problem, and I'm surprised that it didn't get addressed during that game cycle.
No, I definitely agree with that. The other issue that bothers me is when your CPU teammates will, very helpfully to the CPU opponent, scoot out of the way to let them just, Olay defense right to the rim.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's going to be a problem. I think my thing with the wing defenders moving out of the way is it's how often it happened. It was much of the time when you were trying to, like, if you push the ball or if the computer was pushing the ball down the floor. I just don't understand that mechanic. 2K18 skating. This is when they switched motion systems. You and I loved the 2K17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, etc. That motion system. But 2K18 introduced a lot of skating, very poor foot planting, and that's still an issue in the games today. It impacts control, it impacts outcomes, it impacts how the CPU moves and how they respond to certain situations on the floor. It's an eyesore. You can see it when your player is just standing there. So he's supposed to be standing still, but he's starting to float above the court. His feet are sliding around, etc. Never said it was easy to program, but I know that they did it right in so many past games, and 2K16 and 2K17 are an example. So skating and suction. those two mechanics that were brought in with NBA 2K18 really hurt the series, in my opinion.
And I think a key point to make here is frequency, because there are some things that should happen at some point during the game, and having them happen at times is not unrealistic, and it is part of the challenge, but they happen too often, or the CPU can do it too easily. Like, yes, there are times when defenders do play a bit of Olé defense in the NBA, and we talked about it at the top of the show with the All-Star Weekend, but every single time, and in a tough game, for no reason, just scooting out of the way because we're going to give you that lane to the hoop, or we're going to let your opponent go to the hoop if it's a CPU teammate. It's the frequency, and it's kind of like, yes, players do make shots from beyond half court, but it shouldn't be too easy to do. It's the frequency matters.
Volume matters in a big way. Just like you play NBA 2K14, my career, every now and then there is a sequence of skating, right? Like you'll feel like, hey, I slid on that. But it's not a constant force. The volume is so much lower that it doesn't negatively impact your experience overall with the game. That's why the volume needs to be discussed. A couple more, NBA 2K19, and I know Stildo will love that I talked about this. Just players just dropping the ball constantly. We already talked about the pass interceptions, but the dropping the ball thing is crazy because what are we taught, Andrew, at the youngest of ages when we're learning basketball? It's all about gripping the ball, right?
Protecting it,
It's holding on to it. Yeah, you're holding on to it with two hands, protecting the ball. It's one of the first things you learn as a basketball player. But apparently NBA players, professionals who played their whole life, done camps, played in all different levels, they can't hold on to the ball. It just drops out of their hand when it brushes up against somebody's body. They can rub their body up against the ball and it will just fall out of your hands. You'll be dribbling up the court, and then all a defender has to do is kind of like graze by you, and the ball just hits the floor. It's super frustrating, and it's probably Stildo's biggest complaint, I would say, with NBA 2K19, and they have gotten better with that over the last couple of years, but in 2K19 it's really bad. 2K20 player hunched over running is another one. I don't know who programmed that or thought that was realistic at all. Just the overall unrealistic human movement in NBA 2K20, and then also it was in NBA 2K21 in a similar way for PC, Xbox One, PS4. The 2K22 hesitation dribble on fast breaks. This was discussed on another NLSC podcast. Basically, it just completely ruined the flow and the momentum of a fast break, and it happened all the time. And then obviously the poor shooting mechanics in NBA 2K23, where they didn't even release the game with a normal timing option, so you have to choose late or early. I think that was a huge mistake, and it really hurts the game. So these are not all the annoying mechanics that Andrew and I have experienced in basketball game history, but we wanted to go over some of the ones that came to mind.
Absolutely, and look, you may listen to this and think, oh, do you guys actually enjoy basketball games? Absolutely we do, but you only have to look at the responses that you got to your tweet, Derek, to see that we all have these gripes with annoying mechanics over the years, because when you know the genre, when you know basketball gaming, you also know what works, what doesn't, and you've got those annoyances. And we've got a lot of great examples from the community.
So there should be no question if Andrew and I enjoy basketball video games, because we are way more positive on this show on a week-to-week basis than we are negative. And we talk about how much fun we have with these games, past and present. I've talked about how much time I've spent on NBA 2K23, my NBA and my league and my team. Andrew's been absolutely nuts about his NBA 2K14 my career. He absolutely loves it. He's on season 5. I'm connecting with the community on different games like Stildo and playing NBA Live 2004 with people, etc. We love basketball video games, but critiques are important. And, there have been a lot of annoying mechanics in the past and present basketball titles. So I think it's worth talking about.
For sure. Enjoying something and being passionate about something doesn't mean simply accepting everything uncritically, and you can be a fan of something and still be critical of it at the same time while also praising it, which we absolutely do, and as other gamers do. But let's get to our community's responses now, Derek. Steve, the Live King, says, using a button system to make substitutions in 2K. A lot of people want to use the D-pad.
I can agree with that. I think that we've been spoiled in the past with great D-pad sub-mechanics. But I think that my bigger problem with the newer NBA 2Ks, at least for the Xbox One, PS4, and PC versions, is the lack of proper positional play calling. I don't know if you've had an issue with that, but my brother and I try to use it all the time. But in the next-gen version, you can just choose your so you can turn on icons and you can like choose your small forward, and then you can just run a post up for him or cut to basket, isolation, etc. But on the PS4, Xbox One, PC version of, say, NBA 2K23, you have to go through like 3 or 4 screens in order to choose your play. And good luck trying to do that if you're trying to be competitive. You're not going to be able to just You're not going to be able to just stand there, 30 feet from the basket and hold the ball and go through a bunch of screens and then move forward. Like it ends up being a problem. So yeah, I agree. I think D-pad subs are excellent, but also positional play calling is very important.
Next up, we have Deshaun. No dribble stick on the old 2Ks. I've been playing 2K12 on my Series S thanks to new emulation breakthroughs, and it gets rough trying to readjust to what I knew back then. And I've kind of had the opposite, where I've been able to go back to games now and give them more of a chance from that generation. But I do miss, as I said earlier in the show, having that right stick dribbling, those right stick controls in earlier games.
But that was the main mechanic, too, that kept Andrew away from NBA 2K.
Yeah.
For up until NBA 2K13. So I know that resonates with you. I always preferred NBA Live dribbling and triple threat mechanics by a lot. And I think that it was a lot more fun for my brothers and I back in the day, and why we stuck with Live all the way up until NBA Live 07 is because there's nothing more important than having control. And when the control is implemented properly, and it gives you more options on the floor, like more ways to attack. And the right stick gave us more control, and it gave us more ways to attack, so it was more fun. I still can go back and enjoy, say, the original NBA 2K, and then all the way up until, NBA 2K 11 and 12 when they were doing the ISO motion and everything. But I definitely prefer right stick dribbling.
Next up, we have Teddy Bear the Gamer. Says, man, I used to hate being forced out of bounds on NBA Live. And yes, there's even an out-of-bounds boundary slider in those games, which was, I believe, Derek, pretty much put in there they knew that was going to be an issue. So to be able to reduce the chances of that happening and the frequency of that happening, there's actually a slider to combat that. So that was definitely an issue too.
NBA Live 2002 is so frustrating with that. I feel like you go out of bounds all the time because there's a lot of momentum in that game as far as like play movement. Like if you try to execute a crossover or anything like that, it just like you get carried by the animation and you just find yourself out of bounds so often. So no, I definitely agree. There's a lot of games that didn't implement a boundary soon enough.
And our old friend, Rocos Moss D. Jeff Cortinas, says the badge boost and traits mechanic basically everyone ever created. And yeah, that is, as I said earlier in the show, really just infiltrated the online scene in particular, that approach the we need a skill gap, so we're going to also add this metagaming to it. It has its place, and in some of the early games, the signature skills in 2K13 and 2K14, aside from the Acrobat badge, which was the Acrobat signature skill, I should say, that was bugged, and you could do the Eurostep and hit every three after a Eurostep every time, thanks to that glitch. But apart from that, they were implemented much better in the early games. But yeah, they've just really overtaken the meta and the whole bones of gameplay.
Well, it's done the opposite, like we talked about earlier. It's caused less of a skill gap. It's made it so skill doesn't matter as much because it's all artificial boosts and badges and everything. I knew we were in trouble with the NBA 2K series when they implemented the takeover system, where you make a great defensive play or, you go on a scoring spree or something like that, and you get like this big red circle underneath your player that turns you, what do we call it last episode? What, Super Saiyan? It turns you into a super player. And then all of a sudden you're a ball hawking freak defender, and then you're stopping everything at the rim, even if the offensive player makes a great move. That's not skill gap. That's not skill. That's your player being basically given a huge power up and moving unrealistically throughout the floor. So I knew that when the whole takeover thing was implemented in NBA 2K, that things were, going in the wrong direction.
And next up is Stildo33, One Kidney Kenny, of course, on Twitter. And you called it, Derek. Ball jarring loose when you make contact with someone. So dumb. I know it drives you nuts. And yeah, we touched on that. The brushing past the defender and losing the ball too easily. It was really a problem in early games that didn't have the same physics and proper physics in their collision detection. But even after those physics were added, we still get it.
It's constant in NBA 2K19, and it's one of the worst gameplay issues. We already touched on this, so we don't have to go too deep into it. But I am happy that they made improvements in that regard in like the newer 2Ks.
And iMason KOG says the old 2K free throws mechanics from 2K to 2K5 were insane. Cookie Dot also agrees with him, as does Escuela the Gamer. Yeah, so I feel good about that. I'm not alone in hating them. It's not just, I'm such a live head that I hated what 2K was doing. Going back and playing that, I was like, what are they doing? What were they doing at the time when the team eater was right there?
Well, I also want to point out, though, that Live has had annoying free throw mechanics in the past, too. The whole having to, bring the joystick down and then up, and your player looks like a robot while he's trying to shoot the free throw, and you can never really find the release point because it just works. It looks ridiculous, and it doesn't work right. So you'll have a perfectly good free throw shooter at the line, somebody that probably shoots 80 to 90%, and you have absolutely no confidence going up to the line because of those robotic free throw mechanics. But yeah, the green arrow free throws in the earlier 2Ks, absolutely terrible in my opinion.
Tillhouse says, cat and mouse mechanic in 2K with defense always being slower than offense. And C. Riggs adds, on-ball defense has been terrible in all basketball games. Maybe defensive animation styles or movements need to be introduced. I'm so over the sliding and lack of real contact detection.
We touched on this quite a bit. He's talking about sliding, the skating, how that impacts outcomes in gameplay and feel and everything. As far as the cat and mouse mechanics, my biggest problem with that is there's certain games where you can, especially the newer 2Ks with all the slider tweak options that they have, where you can kind of remedy it a little bit, where you can make the defense a little bit faster to catch up on the fast break, faster on their feet and everything, and make them a little bit more effective and make it more realistic. But the problem with that is, and I talked about this on a past NLSC podcast, you shouldn't have to do all of these slider tweaks and basically try to fix the game after it's already been released. The game should be released with solid mechanics by default, because there's multiple modes, including my team and online play, where you can't mess with sliders, right? It's some of the most popular modes in the game. And then there's also the fact that the majority of gamers do not mess with sliders. They put on the game and they jump into Play Now, or they jump into My League, or they just select their difficulty level and then go on to the hardwood. And if the game wants to make the best impression possible, the game's mechanics in relation to player movement should be solid on release. That way it's great in all modes. It creates a great first impression, and in turn they get great reviews by the gamers. So definitely agree. Cat and mouse mechanics, the whole defense being slower than it should be. So I definitely agree with the cat and mouse mechanics, the defense being too slow in comparison to the offense, etc.
And this response is an interesting sidebar, actually. Mike Mello says, microtransactions for boosting your in-game performance in a game that already costs up to $150. Hashtag pay to win. And yes, I mean, obviously we've been focusing on gameplay mechanics, animations, AI, controls, etc. But certainly recurrent revenue mechanics, Derek, do impact the gameplay experience, because if your player is underpowered, they're not as fun to play with, and that does force you to spend more when it really does come down to pay to win or pay to improve or pay to enjoy. then yeah, the recurrent revenue mechanics actually do impact gameplay mechanics, or even being able to have to upgrade to a certain point your my player to be able to unlock animations that are more playable and more effective. So yeah, it really is tied in, and people just say, oh, you just ignore it, but it does affect the gameplay experience.
It's still crazy to me that $150 can be spent on a game and people still feel the need to spend more money in the form of upgrading their players or on packs for my team and everything. It speaks to a real problem. And people feel like they have to do that in order to continue to enjoy the experience, or in the case of online play, be competitive and whatnot. And unfortunately, that's the way the game is designed, and that's on purpose, right? It's designed to make you have to keep spending more, or feel like you have to keep spending more in order to enjoy the experience. So yeah, no, that absolutely counts for annoying mechanics. You shared a tweet with me, we're not going to say the person's name, where they had stated they spent roughly $1,800 so far on NBA 2K23.
That's crazy.
I want you to think about how many games, like at base price, you can buy for $1,800. And that, my friends, is why they do it. Because that one person who spent $1,800 on 2K23 covers the base price of the game tenfold, right? So that's the problem here. Yeah, that absolutely accounts for annoying mechanics.
Next up, we have NC to the Bone says simply shot meter. And yes, shot meters and green releases are a very divisive mechanic. It feels like it's going to be very difficult for gamers to ever be weaned off them. I know that Mike Wong Beluba was talking about doing that, and hasn't been particularly successful in doing so, and his shot aiming approach hasn't been that much more successful either. But yeah, shot meter is one that not everybody, and green releases, that not everybody likes.
I hate using the shot meter, and the biggest reason is because if I'm playing a basketball video game, I want to be focused on the action, right? I don't want to be looking at a meter while I shoot. I don't want to be, going in for a layup, because they have layup timing now and layup meters. I don't want to be going in for a layup and instead of watching my player, watching where the defense is in relation to my player, looking at my surroundings. I want to be looking at that. I don't want to be looking at a meter. It also ruins the immersion and the realism of the game. I think that there's been many examples in the past, and 2K14 being one of them for you, where there's proof that you don't need the meter to enjoy shooting or to be effective shooting or to have realistic shooting in a basketball video game.
Definitely.
I use it on NBA 2K19 on my season with Ken Stildo because he wants to use it. He it's something that he's always used. It makes sense to him. And so I'll put up with it and I'll do that for him. But at the end of the day, I will never choose to have a shot meter on.
Next up, we have Josh Smoke Chess 8891 says the CPU sticking like glue. It is so unrealistic and does not allow for a natural and authentic feeling. I shouldn't have to try and break the defender down with fancy dribbling or rely continually on a screen just so that I can get some breathing room. Would also like to hear your guys' thoughts on the AI not cutting often enough or at the right times. Any solutions? Also, solutions for issues others have mentioned would be awesome. Love how you guys break things down in depth. Looking forward to this next broadcast. And thank you so much for those very kind words. And I absolutely agree. The CPU sticking to you like glue. Just playing my team once, Derek, and I'm trying to take Enes Kanter or Enes Freedom off the dribble with MJ, and he's just keeping pace. And I'm sorry, no, he's getting burned by MJ. And the CPU just being able to stick to you like glue like that. Live 19, of course, because that was so reliant on green releases to make shots, to go back to NC to the Bones point, that it's so reliant on green releases that the CPU being able to stick to you and come in and close that gap and take away that green release and force a miss that really should be a make too often. Yeah, it's all connected. All these mechanics, people, are connected, and that's why they can be so problematic.
So I brought up suction earlier, and I've talked about it so many times on past podcasts. It impacts, attacking on the perimeter. It makes it feel artificial and ridiculous when you're trying to operate out of the post or the high post, etc. Operating off of the elbows and whatnot. And the problem is that even when you do have a quicker player, in your example, Jordan and Kanter, and you do you do a foot fake and then you kind of sort of get them on your side, you're forced into this ridiculous suction-based slow motion side by side where he's just riding you to the hoop. When in real life, if you did that same foot fake and, went to blow by your defender, he wouldn't be stuck to you. Right? You would have gotten by him and you would have been able to throw it down or finish at the rim or be met by another defender, etc. So no, 100% agreed. If you want us to try to come up with a solution for you that would help you out, I would say turn body up sensitivity in the game to 0 in the sliders. That makes it a little bit better, but it's definitely still there. But it will allow you to not be sucked into so many slow motion side by sides. It will allow you to operate a little bit more out of the high post on those elbows and in the post, etc. Try to utilize your fadeaways a little bit more. I know shooting isn't very good in NBA 2K23, but if you're in that position where you're in the high post and you just can't get by the guy, put your butt on him and then use the button to shoot, not the joystick, because the joystick doesn't work very well, and execute a fadeaway. Try to learn that timing, and that's going to be a good way for you to score in those areas in the high post and the low post. Bully ball works well, actually, if you can get a mismatch. So I used the example before of like Magic Johnson on Terry Porter or something like that. Magic's just going to be able to bully him, get him under the basket and score. So look for those mismatches, look for those strength advantages. If you're using classic teams, maybe Shaq on Sean Bradley or something like that. But no, it's really hard to get around those suction issues and the skating issues and everything because they're just part of the game's engine, like Andrew mentioned. And it all just compounds into this frustrating, unrealistic experience.
And of course, CPU teammates just standing around and not doing what they need to do and not making cuts. Yeah, that's always frustrating.
Right. Yeah, I think the AI at times is super promising as far as the way they move off the ball or like how they play against you, etc. But overall, there's a lot of weak points when it comes to off-ball AI movement, especially when you're controlling a team. Even if you have auto play calling on, you will often dribble up the floor and the players will just kind of like be standing around, or you'll get somebody on the high post and they don't have a mismatch. And instead of, going into motion, setting screens for each other, making face cuts and everything, your computer teammates are just standing around. So yeah, the AI could be stronger.
And we've got a couple of people here talking about a very similar issue. First up, Randy Bartholomew says, post player, you bury your opponent under the rim, use the correct hand and blow the point-blank layup. High school kids don't miss as much as 2K. And also, when you move the shot stick in the correct direction and the player goes with the hand closest to the defender and you blow the layup. And Game Boy TV similarly says, when I miss wide open shots that an NBA player should easily make, especially near the basket. And yeah, and this is one of those things that it's hard to get the realism there because players do miss some easy bunnies around the hoop, obviously. But the frequency, the volume, the context is often so frustrating in 2K and live as well, and other basketball games over the years.
I remember a gameplay video from when NBA 2K23 was first released, and this guy had a size advantage. He looked like he was about a 7-footer, and he was, I think the guy that was covering him looked like he was probably around 6'8" or 6'9", and he proceeded to miss about 7 or 8 layups right in a row, right under the rim. He just kept missing over and over and over and over again. And it didn't look like he was releasing it wrong. He just kept missing. Maybe he wasn't loaded out on badges. Maybe his defender was loaded out on badges. Remember, here's that skill gap thing again, right? So it's not because he was doing anything wrong. It could have been the artificial boosts that were making him miss all of these makeable shots. I think it's very unrealistic, the amount of layups that are missed. And I think that the open shot piece boils down to very poor shooting mechanics overall, where you feel like you've timed it right and it still misses. I think that shooting, especially in NBA 2K23, where they didn't release the game with a normal release option, I think that shooting just never feels good. overall in that game, because it's either going to be late or it's going to be early. And then there's all the different shooting animations in the game that work differently from each other. I think that shooting in NBA 2K23 overall is unrealistic and probably the worst in the series ever. I think that it's super unrealistic. The fact that making a contested shot or a semi-contested shot is basically impossible. Think about that on the NBA level, by the way, and when you're using the NBA teams. But, you're missing shots constantly that not only NBA players make, but high schoolers make, rec league players make, college players make, etc. And I think it's a big problem, and I think it hurts the immersion.
Here's one that definitely resonates with me. Hits says, standing still when the loose ball is right next to you and being a taller player but not covering more ground than a shorter player. And yeah, just trying to get that loose ball sometimes and your player just looks at it is so frustrating.
I think the problem is that it's when the computer does it. Like sometimes I'll take blame. Like I'll be like, okay, so that ball was closer to me than I thought and I didn't go after it, right? But when the computer does this, because you can't control all 5 players at once when you're trying to control a team, and let's say there's a long rebound, the ball just bouncing past your AI teammate, and it's like right next to him. All he's got to do is stick his arm out, and he just lets it go by. Or the ball is on the floor, and instead of the AI player going after the ball, he just kind of stands there and lets the opponent get it. So no, I definitely agree that those are problematic.
Papa Doc says, canned animations, Steel's more reliant on RNG than actual timing and skill, and limited archetypes. And yeah, those are definitely some common ones as well.
So yeah, we've gone into canned animations at length and the lack of true skill gap. So we don't really need to spend too much on this. But the canned animations, I just want to let people know, are not only in NBA 2K, they plagued NBA Live 19. In my opinion, there was so many drives, and Live 18 to an extent, but there were so many drives to the hoop where it was just, you'd go towards the hoop, you'd push the shoot button, and you never knew what type of animation was going to play out. It was just basically a crapshoot. And what would happen is it resulted in all of these wild, unrealistic finishes that, were in real life almost impossible to make, but you'd make them all the time in NBA Live 19 and NBA Live 18. So the canned animations piece has been a problem in recent lives and 2Ks.
So we've got a couple of comments here that I want to read out. They do cover some familiar ground. Juicy Shackmeat says, instead of having real basketball involved, recent 2K games became a battle of badges, especially online play. Example, Clamps versus Clamp Breaker. Also think this affects close shots like a force field protects the rim, even though common sense dictates the ball should go in. And IndieBorn2631 also says VC ruined the game as well. So we've got a couple of familiar points there. Definitely a lot of agreement. Intermediate Difficulty Pete says 6-axis free throws and text for profanity. And yeah, those 6-axis free throws in 2K, Derek, 2K7, NBA 2K7 and College Hoops 2K7, and I think also the 2K8 games. Yeah, and if you didn't have the 6-axis controller, if you had a third-party controller, you were out of luck.
That mechanic made no sense for any benefit of the consumer. I don't understand why that was implemented and why it was implemented so poorly. As far as the technical for swearing, I got one. I've talked about this before when playing NBA 2K14 with my Kinect hooked up. I said I threw out an F-bomb because of something that happened on the court. I got a technical foul. They hit the free throw, and I believe I ended up losing that game in a close one and whatnot. So yeah, I think those are both ridiculous.
And Robert Horney says, not being able to run a legit fast break on 2K. And yeah, anything that breaks up the fast break with catching animations or speed, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that have plagued the fast breaks over the last few years since the new motion system in 2K18 is just that suction issue, right? So players getting sucked backwards into the defender, where it looks like in real life they would just have more than enough space to finish with a dunk or a layup. They get forced backwards and sucked in to that trailing defender, and it ends up being a block or a miss or a foul, and it just completely destroys the flow of the fast break. So that's been a problem, I would say, since 2K18.
And the Big Steppers says, the absolute horrendous stamina revamp from 2K17 onwards completely killed online modes for some. People spam timeouts and somehow never have to make a substitution. This system and many of 2K's changes post 2K16 were geared towards park 3v3 play, and it really affected quick play. And yeah, the online mechanics, and the mechanics designed for online play, I should say, really do affect the offline game, for sure, including microtransactions, of course, but even on the sticks as well.
Now, have you noticed that issue that he just mentioned, connecting with NLSC Thrillho and playing those games?
Yeah, and of course, even the more NBA-oriented 5v5 Pro-Am has been affected by those mechanics for sure, and the fact that people can just spam timeouts and troll like that as well, giving people that ability to really ruin the game for, especially when you're playing with randoms, because the whole idea is to be able to, with the rec, to meet up with other people who don't have a squad, or just go in there when you just want some casual play and maybe your friends aren't online, go in there and meet some people and have a few games, and you're competing and everything, and the competitive spirit isn't there, and people are just wanting to go for stats and go for highlights, and look, stats and highlights are fun, but go for the win first, and just mess around with people, the trollers, the griefers, if you want to call them that, to make that comparison to MMORPGs, it's definitely there.
Yeah, and I also want to say before we wrap this up as well, is I wanted to make a quick comment about what Juicy Shack Meat said. He said clamp versus clamp breaker. It's like, well, you have one badge, but I have a badge that's better than yours, so now I'm going to be able to outdo you on the floor. That's not that stuff doesn't belong in a basketball video game. That belongs in a fighting game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's like a Dragon Ball Z mechanic or like a Mortal Kombat thing. Like that's not true skill gap. That's artificial boosts deciding the outcome. So I just wanted to point that out and make sure that he understood that we knew what he was talking about.
And Daniel_MP92 says, the logic of acrobat plays in 2K are ridiculous. No creativity in the most creative thing in basketball. Press square to change hands in automatic animations. In the most time, it's the same animation with completely different players. And also mentions when the ball is fumbled. So yeah, I'd agree with that.
I also kind of feel that way about fancy passes. Like anybody can do like a no-look pass. Anybody can do a behind-the-back pass, all of that stuff. Obviously, there's different levels of success in the execution depending on the player that you're using. But it just feels like it's just kind of a throw-in for like any player. So I agree with him there.
And finally, Murat, also known as Badger from the forum and the Discord, says, I'd say NBA 2K4's free throw mechanism. The presentation is insane, the gameplay is good, but when it comes to free throws, all the magic it has vanishes. Also, some of the games had terrible camera angles. All I wanted was to have a legit broadcast camera, but a lot of 2Ks didn't have it. And we have touched on that before, but yes, that is definitely one of my biggest pet peeves that we've talked about today. I much prefer the T-meter or the current approach of just simply timing it like a regular jump shot. Even the shot aiming of 2K17 is the best way that shot aiming has been done, and it worked really well for free throws. Funnily enough, NBA Elite 11, for all of its missteps, the aiming on free throws was also a good idea. The only way it should have been implemented in that game, among other issues, of course. But yeah, those early free throw mechanics for 2K, not a fan.
Yeah, also the camera views for the early 2Ks, I can definitely agree with that. There was no real good broadcast camera for the earlier 2Ks. They had the cinematic option for like the original, but really it would give you this great broadcast angle for a few seconds, and then it would just zoom right in on the player who had the ball. And it just completely ruined that option. So they had like the side cameras, which is what I usually chose to give it some semblance of broadcast. But yeah, and the thing about free throws, a lot of free throws get taken every single game. So it's like I stated, like with rebounding mechanics and 3-point shooting mechanics, all of that stuff. Like this isn't just something that happens a couple times a game. There's a lot of volume with this, which is why it impacts the gameplay so much. There's a lot of free throws that get taken every single game. So free throw mechanics are very important.
But thank you to everybody who responded to that prompt. Yeah, clearly, Derek, we have a lot of passionate basketball gamers in our community, obviously, and they know their stuff, as I like to think we do as well. And as much as we love games, definitely some annoying mechanics over the years.
Yeah, I mean, we love basketball video games. There should be no doubt about that. We're playing them all the time. It's such a big part of our lives. We have huge basketball video game collections and everything, but there are obviously things that are going to bug us when it comes to games past and present. And same thing with the community, Andrew.
No, definitely. And once again, it is important that we do offer up these critiques. It is wishlist season after all for 2K24, so please get involved with that. And constructive criticism is so important. It's okay to enjoy games. We can even enjoy games that do have some problems, as we pointed out. But that being said, we can also recognize the problems and point them out, and so that we can help the developers with that constructive feedback and hopefully have the games get even better.
Yeah, when you submit your wish lists, people, and you're making it known what you want to see in the games, also make sure to mention what you want to see improved in the games and what you don't want to see. So things like suction, skating, you want to see those out of the game. You want to see those improved upon, less canned animations. You want to see better shooting mechanics, more realistic shooting mechanics. You want to be able to hit a contested shot every now and then. Like, make sure that when you're giving your feedback or submitting your wish lists that you mention those things.
Indeed. With that said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again next week, either on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us and, of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So, Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on Twitter, where I'm the most active, at D4384 and at D43G. I'm also on the NLSC, D43, as a team member over there, and then I'm on YouTube, D43.
I am Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. The NLSC is on Twitter and Facebook at the NLSC. Our Instagram is NLSC Basketball. We're on YouTube at youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.